దూర విద్యా విధానంలో డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ దేశంలోనే మొట్టమొదటి సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం. దాదాపు 2.5 దశాబ్దాలుగా దూర విద్యా విధానం ద్వారా కంప్యూటర్ కోర్సును అనుసంధానం చేస్తూ BA, BCom, BSc డిగ్రీ కోర్సులను అందిస్తోంది. పోస్ట్ గ్రాడ్యుయేషన్ స్థాయి, డిగ్రీ, డిప్లొమా స్థాయి కోర్సులను ఔత్సాహికులైన విద్యార్థులకు అందిస్తోంది. డెవలప్మెంట్ స్టడీస్లో సెంటర్ ఫర్ ఎకనామిక్స్ అండ్ సోషల్ స్టడీస్ ద్వారా ఎంఫిల్, PhDతో పాటు విశ్వవిద్యాలయమే స్వయంగా దూర విద్యా విధాన అంశంపైన PhD వంటి పరిశోధనా కోర్సులు ప్రవేశపెట్టింది. సుమారు 4.5 లక్షల మంది విద్యార్థులు ఈ విశ్వవిద్యాలయం నుంచి ఉన్నత విద్యావకాశాలు పొందుతున్నారు. డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం స్థానికంగా స్వయం బోధనా పద్ధతిలో ముద్రణ రూపంలో రూపొందించిన కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అందిస్తోంది. కోర్స్ మెటీరియల్ అధ్యయనానికి సహకరించే విధంగా రేడియో, టెలివిజన్ పాఠ్యాంశాల ఆధారంగా కార్యక్రమాలు ప్రసారం చేస్తోంది. అధ్యయన కేంద్రాల ద్వారా ఏర్పాటు చేసే సలహా సంసర్గ తరగతులు, సైన్స్ ప్రాక్టికల్ సౌకర్యాలు విద్యార్థులకు స్వయం అధ్యయనానికి ఒక చక్కటి అవకాశం. ఇవి విద్యార్థి సమీపంలో ఉండే అధ్యయన కేంద్రం నుంచే పొందొచ్చు.
Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to another program brought to you by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. This afternoon, we would be discussing organization theory and behavior. Students who are pursuing their MCom first year through the distance mode in Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University have a paper called Organization Theory and Behavior. All of you would have been given a book like this, and this particular book, which covers various issues on organization theory and behavior, is divided into 5 blocks. You would observe that in the first block there are 4 units, and in the second block there are 2 units. This afternoon we would be discussing several of the issues which are laid out in those 6 units. To discuss the various issues, we have in our studios teachers from Osmania University. To my immediate left, I have Professor T. Krishna Kumar. Professor Krishna Kumar has been with Osmania University for more than 2 decades. He has been teaching in virtually every college which is a constituent college of Osmania University where commerce is taught. He was at the Department of Commerce for quite some time at the Osmania University, and currently he is serving as a Professor of Commerce in Nizam College. We also have with us Dr. Patrick. Dr. Patrick too is a teacher in commerce. He is currently a senior faculty member in the Department of Commerce in Osmania University, and he has got rich experience, and the common thing to both of them is that they are corporate trainers, they are mentors, and they are well loved by their students, and you will observe over the next 1 hour or so they will bring to bear on this particular issue numerous insights. However, before I request them to speak, I have to make an announcement, and the announcement is this: at the end of 40 minutes our telephone lines would be open. So viewers who are sitting over there, sitting in your house and watching this program, especially the MCom students, if you have any questions based on what my colleagues would be saying, you are most welcome to ask them. The line which you have to contact, the number which you have to ring in order to reach us is 040-270-1431 or 040-270-1432. Alternatively, 040-2703-1433. So, I hope you got those numbers right. I hope you will avidly listen to my friends over here, and without any further ado, I would now call upon Professor Patrick to tell us what basically an organization means, because bulk of the time today we would be deliberating on organization theory and behavior. So, Patrick, would you be kind enough to tell us what is an organization?
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Now, today's topic is about organization theory and behavior. So, we would first look at what this word organization actually means. As a process, when we understand it, it is a function of management. And when we go about with looking at it from a noun point of view, it's the name of an organization. It can be Google, it can be Apple, it can be ECIL or Infosys or Wipro or anything of that matter. And what exactly the word organization is it involves identification, grouping of activities that are to be performed, and these activities to be divided among the people of the organization. And this is created by establishing relationship among the people in terms of authority and responsibility, and all that is done is to go about with achieving a predetermined goal there. And some of the theorists have said that it is a theory to coordinate the various actions towards a directed goal, and some people said it is a social unit which is deliberately being constructed and reconstructed to achieve a goal. Sir.
Fine. Thank you, Patrick. In essence, what Patrick has told you just now is it could be perceived as a noun, it's an organization. As he mentioned, it could be Google, it could be Facebook, or it could be any other organization. Alternatively, another way of looking at it is you can perceive it as a process, the various things which an organization would be doing. Now, Dr. Krishna Kumar, I've been going through this book, Organization Theory and Behavior, and I came across an expression, properties of organization. Could you kindly throw some light on what do we mean by properties of organization?
Okay, we have this term properties of an organization. As somebody said, we are born in organizations, brought up in organizations, then we work in organizations, we die in organizations, and even after death, these organizations, they follow us. Now, before I get into these properties of this organization, 1 or 2 minutes we will spend on why these organizations are required. A few reasons are, number one, we want to enlarge and enhance our abilities. We want to compress the time, what people were doing over a period of 1 year or 3 months, 4 months. With the help of this organization, we can achieve these things within a short span of time. And there is an accumulated knowledge, and we want to pass this knowledge to our to the next generation. Then what I cannot do as an individual, I want to do with the help of this organization. These are the reasons why many times we form into these organizations. Now, coming to these properties, what we need to understand, whatever be the organization, take it from a family to a big organization, you can consider even MNCs or government also. They have one thing is common, they have a goal, people say goals. Why we talk about a goal or goals is, in every organization we have stakeholders. Many times people that talk about shareholders, we say there are stake owners, there are stakeholders, and for each stakeholder we need to set a goal. Therefore, today what we consider that every organization has goals, not just a goal. The second thing we need to understand, in every organization there are various elements, but we consider the important component in any organization happens with the people, and people constitute the most important, a critical element in any organization. Therefore, the second thing that we think is every organization, we consider them as social entities. People, they come and there is a social relationship they develop. The reason being, there are actions, interactions, and these things they develop a sort of sentiment over a period of time. Therefore, we consider this organization to be social entities. And the third thing we need to understand, more or less these organizations are relatively permanent. We use the word relatively, they are not permanent, they are relatively permanent. There are some organizations, they are there for a long time. There are some organizations, they are coming and disappearing. Therefore, we consider these organizations are relatively permanent. The next thing that we talk about, every organization has a structure. You can think about family, you can think about even MNCs, they have a structure. The structure simply we mean the way we disorganize or I will say divide and integrate the work. When you divide the work, when you integrate the work, the structure emerges. The structure could be a simple structure, or the structure can go up to a matrix structure or a virtual structure. But one thing is common, that every organization has a structure, and this structure is framed, reframed depending on the requirement, depending on the situation, depending on the technologies that emerge. And the next thing that we say, every organizations are open, they are not fully open, they are open. That's what we tell people. The reason is, unless an organization is open, it cannot survive. It cannot survive. If an organization has to survive over a period of time, it has to incorporate, over a period of time we will be discussing the concept of entropy and negative entropy, and we have to take feedback and we have to see that this organization survives over a long period of time. Then the other things that we consider, the properties of modern organizations, we consider these organizations are complex. They are not as simple as we think. They are becoming more and more complex, and because of that today's technology and internet technology, we consider nowadays the organizations are e-organizations, and they have become virtual organizations. For that matter, the present teleconference, whatever is taking place, we think it is a virtual organization, and we are making use of effectively in order to reach our students, or we can say in order to reach sometimes unreached students also, we are making use. Therefore, we consider even Professor B.R. Ambedkar Open University as a virtual organization. Then this organization, we consider them as a boundaryless, borderless organization. Once upon a time, we were defining the boundaries of organizations very clearly. Today, we cannot define in that way. Where these organizations reach, it is very difficult to define. Therefore, today's organization, we consider them to be a borderless and boundaryless organization. Then the next property is, these organizations are, there's a mutual interest, we can say. We contribute something, we get something from the organization. Every stakeholder contributes something to the organization and gets something from the organization. And the last but not the least, the most important thing, nowadays organizations, they have realized, unless they are learning organizations, it is very difficult for them to survive in the long run.
Thank you, Krishna Kumar. For the benefit of the students who have been watching this program, I will very briefly tell you what Professor Krishna Kumar has identified as the properties of an organization. He has started by telling us that it is omnipresent. I hope you are jotting some of those things which he has been telling. He identified goals. He talked about stakeholders. He said that every organization has a structure, and with the passage of time, we will be talking about structure too. He addressed the issue of openness. He also talked about the complexity of business organization. He referred to the boundarylessness of the organization. And finally, he said, if organizations are to reach the next level, they have to be learning organizations. They would strive to be Kaizen organizations and so on. So, thus far what we have said is, what is an organization and what are the properties of the organization. We will now move to what is the meaning of organization theory, and therefore, could I request Dr. Patrick to tell our students what organization theory means.
Now, organization theory is the study that is related with how organizations function and how they affect and are affected in the environment in which they work. Organizations don't operate in vacuum, they are in an environment, and they have been influenced by this environment, and they in turn influence the environment there. So, it is a systematic study, and it examines how the organizations operate. It is a set of theories, concepts, presuppositions that are there, which is related with the behavior of people, the structure as sir has been talking about, and various other things there. And organization theory encompasses the study of structure, the functioning, the performance, and the behavior of people involved in achieving the goals of the organization. To put it in short, in few words there, it is how the organization thinks. It is a macro examination of an organization. It predicts the impact of structure on the performance of the organization and the behavior of the people involved in an organization there.
So there you are, friends, who are watching this particular program. Patrick has told you not only what organization theory is at length, but towards the end of his small presentation, he told us what it means very, very briefly. Having understood what is organization theory, let us hear from Professor Krishna Kumar what organizational behavior entails.
I think in our previous discussion we were thinking one of the most important component in any organization is the people. Okay. In any organization we talk about certain elements like task, structure, technology, people, and they have a strategy and they operate in an environment. Now, in all these elements, the critical thing that has to be managed in any organization happens to be its people. Now, without people, you cannot visualize any organization. And what is this organization behavior? It all talks about, it is a field of study. It tries to investigate the impact that individuals, group, and structures, when these people they come together on the behavior within the organization. And we would like to understand, predict, and control the behavior of people, group, and when they operate in a particular structure, the entire exercise we are doing is in order to improve our effectiveness. It studies about behavior, it studies about human behavior, it studies about human behavior in the organization. The purpose is to understand, to predict and control the behavior, and ultimately we want to achieve the effectiveness of the organization. And sometimes we consider the purpose of the organization is to see that we would like to be productive, which includes efficiency, effectiveness. We would like to see people they get positive, pleasurable feelings in the organization. We consider it as a job satisfaction. We would like to see people they come to their workplace happily, and they will not think about thank God it is Friday. They say thank God it is Monday. They come to office with happiness. That means the absenteeism rate is minimum, and the people that have to think that this is a great place to work. That means they have to derive a lot of job satisfaction, and they have to consider that their place is the best place to work. And what we consider the turnover rate should be at a very low level. Then we want to see people should be engaged. People they have to go an extra mile in the organization to work. It is called the corporate citizenship. The deviance behavior has to be minimum, and there should not be alienation in the organization. And these are the things that should happen at the end of the day if we can manage the behavior of people properly and giving them happiness over a period of time.
So there you are, friends. You got a flavor of what organization theory is, what organization behavior is, but it gives me the feeling that there's a lot of overlap over here. And therefore, one needs to understand what is the subtle difference between organization theory and organization behavior. I'm sure I can call upon Dr. Patrick to tell our viewers how is organization theory different from organization behavior.
Thank you, sir. Now, when we look at organization theory, it's big and it's macro in its analysis. And when we look at the organizational behavior, it is micro in its perspective, and it deals more with individuals and groups. And organization theory is considered to be descriptive and predictive. And organizational behavior, when we look at it, it uses this organization theory to predict the behavior and performance of people at the workplace. Organization theory is said to be in terms of design, and organization behavior attempts to explain and predict the behavior of individuals and groups. And the subjects which contribute towards these two streams that are there is organization theory is more influenced by sociology, and organization behavior is considered to be an offshoot of applied psychology. These are the subtle differences that sir has asked for.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. So, students, I hope you got the picture which we have presented thus far. We have outlined 4 or 5 questions. I'll recap the questions for your benefit. We started by talking about what's an organization. We also mentioned what are the properties of an organization. We took you through organization theory and organization behavior, and just now Patrick has told you what is the difference between organization theory and behavior. Now, the next aspect is we need to know whether organization theory can be classified, and if it can be classified, how can it be classified? And therefore, I would request Professor Krishna Kumar to address that issue and also explain briefly the classification, if any.
This organization theory, what I consider, it is a process of evolution. Okay? There was a saying, when I was a child, I was thinking like a child. Now I have grown up, I think like a grown up person.
Oh, well said.
And this organization theory is like that. And based on the, I can tell you, based on the literature that was prevailing at that particular point of time, based on their understanding, people, they have come out with certain propositions. And they started saying this is the organization theory. And basically, we divide the entire organization theory into 3 categories. We call it as a classical theory, which consists of 3 streams of thought. One is called a scientific management. The second thing we consider administrative theory, and the third one is bureaucracy. Then from there we have moved to the next one. It is called a neoclassical theory. And as I told you, the process of evolution, then they said there are certain limitations. They did not abandon classical theory. They said there are certain limitations in classical organization theory. Let us improvise that classical organization theory. They said it's a neoclassical theory. And based on the knowledge, they said the human relations. And then they borrowed some concept from behavioral sciences. Then they have put together both the things. They called it a neoclassical theory. Then from there we have moved, we obtained a little more knowledge, then we said it is more than that. We have to integrate classical theory and neoclassical theory, and we have to add something, and then they have borrowed something from even computer sciences and all those things. They called it modern organization theory, MOT they call, and it consists of a systems theory and contingency theory. Of course, there is a subtle difference between these two. And as I said, in the process of evolution, we are going on adding, we are trying to overcome the limitations. And the basic properties of a classical organization theory are, and a classical organization theory happens to be a traditional theory, a traditional way of thinking. And classical theory always considered as a machine theory. And you equate normally a human being just like any other human being. And always classical organization theory and depression, a man is always motivated by money. If you give money, he will work. And therefore, it is, and we consider this one as a human being happens to be a rational economic man, always calculates between inputs and outputs. He cannot think beyond these things, and money always motivates people. And if we have to make people to work, and there should be a structure and there should be a close supervision, and what we were expecting, the span should be very narrow, and we have to supervise people very closely. And the classical theory was believing on the anatomy of the organization without understanding the spirit that is operating within the organization. Today, people, they believe that every organization have a soul too. Then they were thinking the efficiency always depends on individual efficiency. They were not thinking in terms of synergy, which we will be discussing over a period of time. Then they wanted to integrate the organization with the help of centralization, authority and tight control. Then always they believed conflict should not be there in any organization. What they were thinking, conflict is always bad. then always they believed I have to give orders, you have to obey me. They were thinking in one-way communication, and always they had a notion that we will not accept. I think sometime back there was a saying about these cars, and I think in the top man told people can have a car of any car, the color of their choice as long as it is bad.
Black.
That means they were not willing to change even the color the customer demanding. That kind of thinking they had. Then the entire classical theory was built on, according to Scott, it was built on four important aspects. The first thing, it was called a division. The second thing, it was built on departmentation. And the third, it was built on structure. And the fourth one, span of control. These are some of the properties you can consider, some of the features of classical organization theory.
So, there you are, students. To my query whether organization theory could be classified, Professor Krishna Kumar has told you that yes, it can be classified. It can be classified into scientific management, it can be classified into administrative behavior, and finally into bureaucracy. We need to know the meaning of some of these things. What does scientific management mean? What does administrative behavior mean? And we also need to know what are the elements of bureaucracy. So, we would now request Dr. Patrick to throw some light on what is scientific management, and was management prior to that not scientific? Yes, Dr. Patrick.
Thank you, sir. Now, Frederick Winslow Taylor is considered to be the father of scientific management, and I mean, the way sir has asked it, was it not scientific before, later it became scientific. The focus of what Frederick Winslow Taylor, or F.W. Taylor as we know him, was more on the shop floor, and his entire emphasis is divided into two aspects. One is the mechanical aspect, and the other thing that was there is to do with the management or the philosophical aspect that we have. And what he had done is, he had gone about it studying how work is being performed at the shop floor, and in the mechanical aspect, he had gone about with working with time study, which ensures what is the standard time that it takes to perform a particular task or an activity, and what are the various bodily movements that are involved when people go about with performing work. And he had gone about with developing some symbols and signs to undo or remove the unnecessary actions that are there, which makes people tired, which led into the next thing, which is called the fatigue study. If you are going to delay the process of fatigue, then people go about it performing more, they are more productive, they are more active. And the next thing is, he went about with conducting the works in a very scientific way, which was very rational. It had an element of logic, cause and effect relationship was always established, and he developed what is called as a differential price rate. That is, he was trying to go about it differentiating the ones who are performers, the ones who were non-performers, and they shouldn't be paid on the same platform. So, he developed what is called as a piecemeal rate kind of payment, and he developed what is called as functional foremanship. And all the tasks that are to be done, he believed that it is to be standardized and simplified. Now, these are the things which I said, that is time study, motion study, fatigue, scientific task, differential piece rate and functional foremanship, standardization and simplification. These things come under the mechanical aspects. And when it comes with the management or the philosophical aspects, he said, when you select people, don't do them by nepotism or any other things there. Select them on scientific basis, teach them what are the elements of the work. There is nothing called as rule of the thumb, and he emphasized on cooperation and not individualism, and he always emphasized on maximum output and no restricted or constricted output, and he was for harmony and not for discord among the people who go about with working at the workplace. And his entire theory had two things to it. One is, there was a positive side to it and there was a negative side to it. Along the positive side, he emphasized on productivity. Now, what productivity is, when you look at a block diagram of an organization, we talk about input, process and output. At the input, we talk about the 5 M's, that is the men, money, machines, materials and management. And there are different ways of conversion. It could be job shop, batch, process, assembly line, continuous, mass or project kind of conversion. And ultimately, any organization gives only two things. It either gives goods or services. Now, when we find a ratio between the value of the goods and services to the value of the inputs that have been given, now this is what we call it as productivity. Now, this can be greater than 1, it can be equal to 1, it can be less than 1. When it is greater than 1, the organization is working in a productive way and profitable way. When it is equal to 1, that is where we call it as break-even point. Or when it is less than 1, the organization is consuming a lot of inputs but not producing valuable goods and services there. The next emphasis was on lowering the costs, and he was for reducing the costs that is there. This is very imperative. Even today, if we look at organizations don't have a say in fixing the selling price, so they have to go about with controlling the cost price, and he was from that time talking about lowering of the cost, raising the standard of living among the people, consumers and the workforce that was there. And he emphasized a lot on industrial peace. And the best part of it is he was talking always about the right man for the right job, that is matching the job to the kind of potential, the personality, the nature of the employee that was there. And on the negative side, if we look at, his concept is considered to be very narrow. It is limited only to the shop floor. It's very technical, and it at times depersonalizes work. It's considered to be expensive, and just as what Professor T. Krishna Kumar had said, it gave an emphasis more on money and money alone, wherein it was of economic man, and many considered that it was undemocratic in nature, wherein the people who are actually doing the work and the ones who are planning for the work, they are being separated. So this is something to do with the negative side there.
So friends, I hope you got an idea what scientific management is. Professor Patrick has very succinctly told you what it's all about. He addressed the issue of time and motion study, fatigue study, monotony. He talked about the importance of selecting people to have the right person for the right job. He also told you what is the upside and the downside of scientific management, and most importantly, he told you that look, Frederick Taylor thought that man was an economic man. But with the passage of time, organization theory has been telling us that man is not an economic man, he is some other type of man. What type of a man he is, we will have Professor Krishna Kumar to tell us after some time. But for the moment, we will go to Professor Krishna Kumar and try to find out from him whether there are principles of management, and if so, how many are there and who propounded it, and are these principles of management universal? Professor Krishna Kumar.
Many times we have observed IAS officers managing different types of organizations. Okay, sometimes they will be in the commercial tax department, then they will be in transport department, and there are some, and they manage so efficiently. Sometimes we get it out how they could able to manage these organizations. When we ask them, they tell only one thing: the principles are same. Whatever be the organization, the principles of managing these things are same. And these principles are propounded by Henry Fayol, and he has classified the functions of organization. Then he has propounded certain principles, and because of these principles, we are able to manage so many organizations by following these principles. But if we ask whether these principles are universal, sometimes our answer could be yes, but the thing is, these principles are not the principles like the principles that are there in our physics and chemistry. They could change a lot. But the famous principles, what we consider the 14 principles propounded by Henry Fayol. The first thing that he considers the division of work. I think whatever be the organization today, what we consider the division of work is required. Of course, over a period of time, people they talk about multitasking, but still the division of work has its own place. The second thing that we talk about authority and responsibility. The first, say, if when I enter some work to a person, the person should be given sufficient amount of authority, and the people who are given this authority should be also made responsible for the work that they are doing. Therefore, he considers the second thing, he talks about authority and responsibility. And the third thing he says, without discipline, no organization can achieve its goals. Therefore, the third thing is a discipline is required. And fourth thing we talk about, there should be unity of command. You should receive instruction from one boss. That is what he believes. Of course, nowadays in the matrix type of organization, we may deviate, but this is the principle. You have to get your instruction from one superior, and that helps you to perform your duties very well. Otherwise, what he believes, there will be confusion. And the fourth, and the next thing that we talk about, things related to one activity should be under one department. We call it the unity of direction. Then the most important thing And when we deviate, we are getting into a problem is subordination of individual interest to the organizational interest. What we believe, if we protect our organization, if we surrender our interest to the interest of the organization, a day will come, organization will protect us. And the next thing that we talk about, remuneration, and the remuneration should be fair, and because in the organization we are paying salaries to the human beings. When we pay salaries to the human beings, we have to remember the most important thing, they are human beings. The reason is, in many places this principle is grossly violated. They want to pay remuneration just like they pay remuneration to other factors of production like interest rate or a rent or something, but here it is something totally different. Then he talks about centralization. What he says, if decision making ability or all these things are kept at a higher level, he calls it centralization. Then if they are at the lower level, we call it as a decentralization. Then if an organization has to survive over a period of time, they have to get clear instruction. Authority should flow from top to bottom without any interruption. Of course, people, they talk about gangplank and all those things. That's the next thing. Then any organization, if it has to survive in the long run, what we need is there should be initiative. Initiative should be encouraged, and of course, slight time I digress. Initiative, innovations, these things should be encouraged in the organization, then only this organization will survive. Then we talk about there should be order, things should be kept at the appropriate place. Every person has got a place, everything has got a place. Then people should be treated with fairness, there should be equity in the organization, and what Fayol believes, there should be a stability of tenure, so that people, they do their jobs, the dangling sword should not be there. That is what he believes. And the last thing is, in unity there is always strength. United we stand, divided we may fall. And whenever we listen to these principles, sometimes we get a doubt, are they really principles, are they some sayings? But that the criticism of this, but one thing is certain, these principles, they helped many people, many organizations to survive in the long run.
Now, that's very important, students. Towards the end of his presentation, Professor Krishna Kumar has clearly told you that those principles have been the hallmark of successful people. Among the various principles which he mentioned was the principle of order. And you need to understand that when you go through your study material, it talks about material order and human order. Material order is the right thing in the right place, and human order is the right person in the right place. Dr. Patrick, you know, when we talked to Professor Krishna Kumar about whether organization theory could be classified, he mentioned that yes, it could be classified. He said it could be classified into scientific management, into administrative behavior, and into bureaucracy. Since you have already spoken about scientific management, and since Professor Krishna Kumar has thrown some light on administrative behavior, could you now tell us something about what is bureaucracy and what are the features of a bureaucratic organization?
Sure. Normally, when we talk about this word bureaucracy, we refer to the civil servants. We talk about the IAS, IPS officers, and some of the government organizations that we visit. We say that they are very inhuman, they are very routinized, they are very rigid with the rules, there is a lot of red tapeism that is associated with it. But the first time this word bureaucracy that was there was started off by a German sociologist by name Max Weber, and it is a structure which rates high on complexity, on formalization, and on centralization. There is rigidity, and there is routinized processes that are involved in this kind of a thing. There is specialized offices which are systematic in their rules. They are considered to be very much impersonalized, and there is legitimized authority that is involved in the office, and it is not the person who is incumbent, but it is the seat which matters a lot in such kind of offices there.
Fine, thank you. Friends, I believe in summarizing things always. I would like to tell you what we have discussed thus far, and I would request you to make a phone call to find out from us in case you seek any clarification. What we have done thus far is, we have asked what is an organization, what are the properties of the organization have been identified. We threw some light on organization theory, organization behavior. Dr. Patrick told you how the two are different. Then we came across organization theory being classified into three things, namely scientific management, administrative behavior or administrative management, sorry, and bureaucracy. And for all these three things, we have highlighted what are the advantages and the disadvantages. We now move to what is known as the neoclassical approach. Bear in mind, Professor Krishna Kumar has already referred to it very briefly. He told you that there is this thing called Hawthorne studies and so on. I would now request Professor Patrick to tell our audience what is the meaning of neoclassical approach.
Now, this neoclassical approach developed as a reaction to the classical principles, and Krishna Kumar sir had very elaborately said about what is this classical theory about. And Elton Mayo is considered to be the father of human relations. What he had done is, for 8 long years, with other professors from Harvard Business School and other places, he had gone about with doing a very deep-rooted 8 years of intensive study in Chicago, in a telephone equipment manufacturing company, and that was known as Hawthorne, what sir would later discuss about the implications of that Hawthorne effect. Now, what I would tell out is, in his study, he had gone about with studying the entire process in 4 phases. First one was the illumination effect, wherein when the place where people are working, the intensity of light, when it was increased and decreased, they were trying to check what could be the impact of that on the productivity, and they found that light had very little impact unless and until at a point where they were not able to see anything, the productivity dropped drastically. The second thing that they did was the relay assembly room, and this was to understand the working condition, the productivity, and the attitude towards the group people there. And in the third phase, they conducted mass interview, wherein 20,000 people were interviewed to understand as to what really goes about with getting in their minds, how do they enjoy work, the work conditions, their other things that were there. And the fourth phase, it was to do with the bank wiring, and this was to understand the incentives that were being given, because prior to it, in scientific management, there was a differential piece rate system that was given here. So they were trying to understand what is the impact of it, and towards the end, they came out with a classification of workers into the rate busters, the chiselers, and the squealers that were there. And in the classical theory, as Professor T. Krishna Kumar has just said, that man was seen more as an economic man here. But for the first time, the definition of man at the workplace was changed, and here it became what is known as a social man. So what we go about noticing is, when we look at the rate buster, he was able to go about with going beyond the targets that were set by the management there. But the person who was to do with a chiseler, he was operating at a lower level, and he would tell it to the rate buster that if you start operating at this level there, the management is going to increase the standards, and either way I am going to lose the job, and you would be more burdened with higher targets in future. So in the interest of all of us, why don't you reduce the rate at which you produce, so that I am at ease, I don't lose my job, and you are a good friend of mine. So the rate buster would drop the rate at which he is producing to accommodate his friend. So for the first time, it was seen that man is not guided just by money and performance that's there, he is guided by the social need as well there. So here the social person kind of a concept evolved, and what we rightly say, Elton Mayo is considered to be the father of human relations. So that was the outcome of this approach, and this is the first one that we have in the neoclassical approach around.
So our student viewers, you are watching this program in the confines of your drawing room, and our friend Dr. Patrick has told you what neoclassical approach is. My submission to the student viewers who are eager to become HR professionals is to go through the Hawthorne studies very intensely. These are studies which were undertaken, as Dr. Patrick said, over a period of 5 years. 20,000 employees were involved in that, and it's a very, very significant study. As he told, look, man has moved from being an economic man to now we are perceiving him as a social man. Now, to add to what Dr. Patrick has said, I would request Dr. Krishna Kumar to tell us what are the conclusions of the Hawthorne studies.
I think in the beginning itself, I made certain things very clear, that organization, one of the critical components is the people and managing people. And one of the properties we said, these organizations are social entities. Okay, in the classical theory, we consider a human being maybe to some extent equated with a machine, but here it is proved that it is not like that. Because when people they came together, and a social system is developed, I said activities, interactions, they develop a sort of sentiments and people form groups. And here the group dynamics and other things they are given a lot of importance. Work, work environment, leadership. They have gained a lot of significance in these Hawthorne experiments. And the first time they were started saying organization, it is not a technical system, it is a social system. Of course, over a period of time, we will say organizations are socio-technical system. The second thing, they have understood the impact of the social environment on the productivity. By giving money, you cannot get things done. Money is required. In the classical theory, we were saying that money plays a very important role. Money is the only motivator. But now we have understood money makes many things. Okay, money buys many things. But remember, in our life, all precious things are not for sale. Okay, therefore, what we are, and people and there's one more saying, and people they work for money when there is no money. But in other words, man shall not live by money alone. He lives by money when there is no money. But when money is available, he seeks some other things also. And therefore, what we have started understanding, money is motivator, but it is not the only motivator. There are other things which motivate people. Then we have started understanding there is an organization we consider informal organization. All these things we were talking about, organizational hierarchy, command control system, but we have understood apart from formal organization, there is another organization that is operating within the organization. This is considered as informal organization. Informal leaders, they play a vital role, and all these members happen to be the members of this informal group. And the next thing, in the classical theory, our belief was on one-way communication. Here we started believing on it is not one-way communication, a two-way communication plays a vital role. For example, there was a mass interview conducted. I think Dr. Patrick was explaining. Mass interview was conducted. In that one, several things they came out. And one of the thing is the role of two-way communication. Then, as I told you, classical theory always believed that there should not be any conflict in the organization. Conflict is always bad. But in the neoclassical theory, we have started saying, oh, it's not like that. Conflict will be there. We need to integrate this conflict with the organization. And always neoclassical theory believed you need to relate work with the organization structure.
Thank you, Dr. Krishna Kumar. So, over the last 6 or 7 minutes, we have been talking about the neoclassical approach. We have been talking about the Hawthorne studies, and I have already underscored the fact that it is a very crucial thing to understand, especially for students who want to get into a job which involves HR and so on. Now, my next question to Dr. Patrick is human relations a part of neoclassical approach?
So, very rightly, this human relations is considered to be a part of this the neoclassical theory, as you rightly said, sir. Now, there's a person by name Keith Davis who had gone about with saying that human relations is to do with motivating people, and you create positive vibes at the workplace. You go about developing teamwork which will effectively fulfill their needs and achieve organizational goals. And the focus here is on people. Now, if you recollect a moment ago, I said about the input, process and output, and I said 5 M's. I said men, money, machines, materials and management, wherein we have equated men with the other factors of production. Now, man is above these factors. So, he has life, flesh, and you can't equate him with the inanimate things like materials, machines, money and other things there. He is above these things there. So, he has a kind of a thing wherein you can't compartmentalize things. The way things go at home or the workplace, you can't live in watertight compartments. So, there are impressions which get carried. So, the focus in the human relations approach is on the people. It's about the happiness which is related with productivity. If he is happy, if he is involved, he is motivated and he goes about with performing better. And you talk about seeking what is called as this cooperation among his fellow workers and having a bonhomie among his workmen around there. So, you get the best of a person if you understand him better. So, if you look at it this way, OB is all about understanding oneself better, and then you go about understanding others there. So you're giving priority to the human relations, which is very essential, which was ignored prior to this, especially in the classical theory. Human relations didn't matter much, it was only money and money alone there. So here at this point, they started to believe that human relations matter a lot, and it does have an impact on the productivity, the performance, and many other things which go on in the organization there.
Fine. Now, Professor Krishna Kumar, my next question might sound repetitive and redundant, more so because we've been talking about neoclassical approach at length. And before I request Professor Patrick to talk about modern organization theory, could you tell us what are the characteristics of the neoclassical theory?
Okay, based on what we discussed regarding Hawthorne experiments and human relations movement, this human relations, we will summarize the characteristics of neoclassical theory. The first thing, as I told you, these organizations are social systems and social entities. And the second thing, surely the social environment affects the performance of people. I am not saying management style, all those things are not important. They are important. Apart from this management style, the social environment plays a vital role in the organization. Maybe sometimes we get a wrong impression when we see the Hawthorne experiment that only informal organizations are great. It is not like that. What we tell people, formal organizations and informal organizations, they have to coexist. And the next thing is, as I told you, conflict is inevitable in the organization. We should know how to manage this conflict in the organization. Then a man happens to be interdependent, and several sociological, psychological variables that impact a human being's performance in the organization. Then man is motivated not just by money, but he is motivated by several other things. Money happens to be one of the motivators. The next thing is, we think a human being is always rational, but all of us know that always we are not rational. Several things that guide us while taking decisions. Then communication, what we have understood is imperative and two-way communication. We are giving lot of emphasis. And the most important thing, it is the group work that helps us to achieve greater things in the organization.
Thank you, Krishna Kumar. Professor Patrick, you know, at the outset, when we started this program about 45 minutes ago, you did tell us what is organization theory. Nowadays, people talk about modern organization theory. Could you tell us what is modern organization theory and what are the features of modern organization theory?
Now, sir, we have done this classification of organization theory in terms of classical, neoclassical. The third part of it is the modern organization theory, or in short we call it as the MOT. Here it emphasizes that organization is a structured process in which individuals interact for objectives. Now it is an integration of classical and the neoclassical theory. And the modern theory that is there, it consists of two things, that is the contingency approach, and the other one that we talk about is the systems approach. And more so, the MOT is more known as the systems theory, as we call it. And contingency approach towards the end says that, you know, there's nothing like a theory which fits for every situation that is there. You got to go about with working according to the situation, what best fits that situation. We got to act accordingly. And modern organization theory, it said, has evolved from a pattern of general system theory, as Professor T. Krishna Kumar has just said about computers and other things having an influence on development of this organization theory. And it is considered to be adaptive. Now that is where in the recent past we talk about learning organizations, where we teach the workers there that there is nothing called as new. You got to adapt and evolve yourself with the changes that are happening. There is nothing constant in this world. If there is anything constant, it is change around. And the most important part that we have here is, we say that the organization and the environment that are there cannot be alienated. They cannot be separated. They are interdependent. That is the crux of this modern organization theory. So here what we notice is this modern organization theory is broadly classified into two things, that is the systems theory and the contingency theory that we have there.
Fine, thank you. So we have moved from scientific management to administrative behavior to bureaucracy to neoclassical approach to Hawthorne studies, and we have just arrived at modern organization theory. where Dr. Patrick has told us that there is a thing called systems approach and another thing called contingency approach. I would now request Professor Krishna Kumar to tell us what is the systems approach, what are the elements of a system?
Anything we consider as a system, if it is composed of related dependent elements and when they interact to form a unitary whole. When these things are satisfied, we consider them as a system. And of course, after some maybe if we have time, Dr. Patrick or someone will enlighten on what is a closed system or open system. But basically, every system has a cycle. Is called, it's a process where inputs, transformation, outputs and feedbacks, these are the basic elements of any system. Then every system has got a subsystem, and this subsystem you can consider according to Eric as socio-technical system, or somebody said as according to based on organization development, it is called open system planning. Every system has got some subsystems, and these subsystems are interrelated, and systems have a process input, throughput and output, and there is a flow of information, material and energy. In a system you have a synergy. Then every system has got a boundary, but of course modern system where this boundary ends, it is very difficult to define. But in a system there is a feedback, but we tell in the case of a closed system the feedback may not be there, but in the open system always there is a thing, it is known as feedback. Then these systems have this homeostasis, that is they are self-regulative. Then always we believe this there is entropy, and to overcome that we will have a thing known as negative entropy that takes place in the case of a system. And in a system we have two important things. One is a differentiation, the second one is called integration. Then systems always believes in law of equifinality, where we may change the input, the composition of input in order to get the same amount of output. As I told you, this system has subsystems, they are interdependent. This interdependency could be a pooled interdependency, a sequential interdependency or a reciprocal interdependency. Then again when we go to these subsystems, these subsystems could be technical, social, power, structural and managerial subsystems.
So thank you, Professor Krishna Kumar, for having told us what a systems approach is, what is a system and what are the elements of a system. We would like to cover much more ground, but you know all of us have to stick to the time, and we are running out of time. All in all, what we have told you this afternoon is what are the nuts and bolts of organization theory. And I have really enjoyed myself listening to my colleagues, Professor Krishna Kumar and Dr. Patrick, for enlightening all of us on what organization theory and behavior is. I would like to thank the viewers for watching our program. I would like to thank my colleagues, Professor Krishna Kumar and Professor Patrick, for taking time and being with us.